Hi everyone and welcome to Mach 5 channel. My name is Daryl and today we are going to be looking at the pre-flight setup of the flight management system in the Boeing 737-800 Zibo mod in X-Plane 11. If you would like to skip the flight plan explanation, just fast forward to the time that I have recorded down in the comments section. If you like what you see here today, please give this video a like and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss out on any content. On the Mach 5 channel you can reference all my video tutorials, guides, and gameplay neatly organized. Thank you for watching and I hope you enjoy. Okay, so we've entered the aircraft, we've established electrical power, we moved the IRS switches to aligned, finished the rest of the initial setup when you enter the aircraft, and now we're ready to program the FMS. I generated an OFP, that's short for Operational Flight Plan, off SimBrief.com, and it's pretty impressive. I just signed up for it a couple days ago, and it's totally free. You know, you can donate some cash, and I recommend it because this is really nice software. It's basically exactly airline level type of flight plan. This is exactly what you would receive if you were the operating flight crew at a major airline. So it only took me about 5 or so minutes to generate this flight plan, and it's got all the planning stuff that I need to basically set up the FMS. Just to go through it real quick here, top's summary of various information, stuff like the captain name, the date, the fin number, your dispatcher. Obviously that's not a correct dispatcher. I'm pretty sure if you call this number you won't get anybody. There's a remarks section for the dispatcher to put in certain remarks. For example, if you're in ETOPS flight, it might say ETOPS, or whatever other remarks you might want to forward along to you. Here's a PRAME check is completed with no outages, so that means that we have RAME at our destination and at our origin, as well as the alternate for a certain time period before and after we're planned to get there, which basically means that the GPS is going to be getting really good signal. If there's any MELs, any defects with the aircraft, they'd be listed under the MEL items. And here's the planning summary. They planned to set a cost index of 50. Basically, as far as cost index goes, it's anywhere from 0 to 100. And if you're at 0, that means you're trying to go there as fast as possible. If you're at 100, that means you're trying to save as much fuel as possible. And any number in between is going to be kind of an index of that. So 50 would be, you know, roughly 50% concern about time, 50% concern about fuel. Your dispatcher would set that up for you. But when you go to build your flight plan at SimBrief.com, you can set that up however you like. And like mostly even like the cruising flight level, all that is basically all done automatically. It's all optimized to try to save fuel. And it gives us the full routing down here, section for writing down any ATC clearances when we call up to get a clearance if we're not using data link. And the alternate here today is Ontario. And if we did have to divert to the alternate from LA, it'd be at 7,000 feet, and it would take us about 31 minutes to get there until we're landed. Burn a 1.1. That's 1,100 kilograms of fuel. And down here's our planned fuel information. Basically, you know, our burn today is going to be 12.8 tons. We're going to take 4 hours and 43 minutes to get to LAX. Planning 0.2 for the taxi, 1.1 to get to our alternate. Our reserve fuel is 1.1. Estimated fuel over the destination should be 2.9. That's maybe a little bit, well, that's not too bad. That would work okay, actually. It's pretty reasonable, especially if the weather's good there. Here's operational impacts. Basically, if we increase our weight by a ton, it's going to cause an extra 0.1 on the fuel burn, so an extra 100 kilos of fuel burn, and it's not going to cost us any extra time. If we dialed our cost index, for example, down to 0, we would burn 0.1 less, and it would take us an extra 8 minutes to get there. So I think it would make sense to burn an extra 0.1, get there 8 minutes sooner, especially if you're behind schedule. Here's just an area for all the crew members to sign. This is the times, so estimated time of departures at 23:30 local, which is also 22:30 Zulu, which is 18:30 local time. And there's space here to write your actual times. And so today it's going to take 5 hours and 11 minutes gate to gate. That's the plan. And the scheduled time for this flight is 5 hours and 10 minutes. And that would be set by the particular airline that you're working for. Here's our weight summary information. So it's release number 1. That means this is the first flight plan that was generated. And if it needs to be amended, that would then become release number 2. There's 183 passengers is what we're estimating. Zero fuel weight of 60.8 with 15,900 on the fuel, and a takeoff weight of 76.4 tons. Landing in LA at 63.6 tons. That's the plan. This is the maximum we'd be able to take on this aircraft, and that's due to this this T here, which is takeoff weight maximum of, it looks like 79.0 tons. And it says here maximum takeoff weights based on 22 left, runway 22 left at plus 2 degrees Celsius with a QNH of 29.75. There is a terrain clearance check that's completed with no limitations. I don't know if I would fully trust that, considering we're heading over the Rockies, so that might be a little bit of a stretch there. But I mean, I would be shocked if they had that kind of information in these flight plans. I mean, it's already very sophisticated as it is. And here's the flight log. So each waypoint that we're going to go by, and all the information. Estimated en route time, total time, estimated time over, actual time over, you can fill out along the way as we're monitoring our progress. What flight level we're going to be at, minimum off-route altitude, initial magnetic track, initial true track, distance, Mach number, true airspeed, ground speed, wind component, and the shear value. The shear value is just a measure of how much the wind speed and direction changes at each altitude, and that can give you a rough estimation of where you might expect to see some turbulence. So I've never seen a shear value of 9, so that would be something I would be looking at in more detail, maybe on the weather charts. But you know, when I start to see 2s, 3s, and 4s, then I can, you can reasonably expect to see some significant turbulence. Then you get outside air temperature, temperature deviation, and the tropopause altitude. Estimated fuel on board, actual fuel on board, and minimum fuel on board. So you can see for example, when we're going past Papa Mike, that's the Pullman VOR, we're going to have 13.6 tons of fuel, and minimum is going to be 12.9. So if we're running less than that, that means we're going to start burning into our alternate reserve fuel. So that could be a problem. But as long as we're above that number, we're reasonably in good shape. We're expecting to see something like 13.6, maybe even better. And you can see there, if you go 13.6 minus 12.9, we're carrying about 0.7 extra 700 kilos of fuel that we for any unforeseen delays or weather delays, ATC delays, that type of stuff. And it's got that for every single waypoint going along here. And here's wind information, various altitudes, wind speed, direction, and temperatures. We come down here. This is the ICAO flight plan. Basically, the filed flight plan that would be sent to ATC. And here's next thing would be crew alerts, so stuff the company wants to advise you of on your flight plan, sort of like company NOTAM type of messages. And then we've got Detroit NOTAMs for the airport, for the runway, for the SID, for the approach procedures, and destination NOTAMs for Los Angeles. Same stuff here, lots of stuff. Especially, you know, in the simulator, I'm probably playing on my PC when I'm gaming. I'm probably not going to be too worried about this, about NOTAMs, and alternate as well. But this is what you would receive on an actual flight. Maybe you wouldn't have so many NOTAMs. Maybe your dispatcher would be able to cut them down for you, trim them up, and then you get a whole bunch of en route NOTAMs. Stuff like active military operations areas, temporary flight restrictions, you know, this VOR is out of service, that type of stuff. And down here at the very end, we're getting close to the end now. You get a METAR and a TAF for Detroit, METAR and a TAF for LA, same for Ontario, so you can check the weather. And you can see the weather is great pretty much all day in LA, all day in Ontario, so that would for sure meet our alternate requirements. And that's probably why we didn't really plan a whole lot of fuel, because when we get to LA, we're not expecting any delays, and we don't expect any problem getting into that airport. A lot nicer than Detroit is right now. So Detroit right now, let's see, it's roughly around, we're planning at 23:30 Zulu departure, so it's you know, 13 gusting 20 from 030, 5 miles in light drizzle mist, overcast at 800. So yeah, it's not a great day, but it's easy to get in and out of in that type of weather, no big deal. Then we've got a bunch of SIGMETs, stuff like wind shear and turbulence will be indicated with the SIGMETs, and then a little map is drawn out. With our routing, we've got the jet stream here. This is the lowest area, the troposphere. The highest area right here at 340. So we might be in and out of it as we're cruising along here. And you can see the routing takes us a little bit to the north, probably to avoid this jet stream. A more direct might put us in that. Hard to say. So it's things to keep in mind when ATC is asking if you want to cut a corner. Maybe you might want to stay on your flight plan route to avoid this stiff headwind here. It looks like it's 110 knots right on the nose. It's probably not that much better out here anyways. There's the upper winds at flight level 300, 340, 390, and there's our vertical profile, and you can see the mountains. Once we get about, you know, halfway through our flight, those things will start showing up on our terrain display. You can see here we're gonna climb up to can't remember what altitude it said on the flight plan, but you'll see later. We're gonna step climb up after this waypoint, just prior to Delta Bravo Quebec, which is Dubuque, and yeah, we'll be popping in and out of the troposphere right at the tropopause. So I suppose that's got the potential to have some turbulence and stuff like that when we're transiting these areas. You know, if you were light enough, you might want to jump up and get above all that. And if it was bumpy and you couldn't get any higher, you might consider descending. But of course, you know, ATC is always a good resource to ask if they're available. So that's the flight plan. It's, you know, 44 pages long, and you know what? To be honest with you, I get when I'm at work, I get flight plans that are this big too, and you kind of got to go through them and make sure everything looks good. So that's a quick little overview of the flight plan. And like I said, I got it from SimBrief.com. I'm completely blown away at how great their software is. It's really great. You know, I'm equally blown away by the Zibo mod here, the Boeing 737, and how sophisticated it is. It's extremely close to the real thing. So we'll carry on with the FMS programming here. So first thing we're going to do is go to the FMC, and actually, you know, we might even consider, so for example, grabbing an ATIS, and I just realized it has ATIS functionality. I have real world weather turned on in X-Plane 11 right now, so if I request an ATIS here in Detroit, hit the send button, it's going to get me the latest ATIS for Detroit. But if we're going to continue programming along here while we're waiting for that, we'll go to the ident page first, and just check that we've got the correct model, Boeing 737-800, and engine is selected correctly, 26K engines, and this is the nav data. Mine's not active. I gotta get that updated, but so mine's only current from the 20th of July until the 16th of August in 2017. So we'll just not worry about that here on our we're PC gaming. This is the latest software that's in this. It's the U13 software, and that's basically the software that we're using, that the Boeing 737 is using at this time. I heard there's a U14 coming out soon. We're going to go to the pause init page next, and we're going to align the IRSs. I'll enter Detroit identifier in the airport reference line there. We'll go to the next page, and the most accurate position you're going to get on this aircraft, on really any aircraft, is a GPS. So we'll grab either one of these positions is fine. I'll grab the right GPS position. It says enter IRS position here in the scratch pad. You just push the clear button, you can clear that out. And there's another message here that says nav data out of date. Yeah, we know that. We can clear that out. So there we go. There's, you just select it to drop it down into the scratch pad, and we'll go to the back to the previous page, and we can compare this position, make sure that it's somewhat close to this position as a gross error check, and we can drop it right there to set the IRS position. And I moved the switches to align probably about 10 minutes ago, so the IRS is fully aligned now. And here's the time and date. Let me go back and just show you guys. Oh, so basically this, when you hit this button, this just always brings you to the pretty much the next page that needs to be programmed usually. So often whenever you're done a section, often you'll just come down to this line select key at the very bottom right here, and that'll take you to the next step in the programming. So once we do end up on the route page here, Detroit will show up in my origin automatically, and we're going to LA today, and that's Kilo Lima Alpha X-Ray. So I'll insert that into the destination. Flight number is, I have a United paint scheme, so I'm going to go with United Airlines 0507. But you usually wouldn't include this 0 here, so I'll just put UAL 507 and insert that under the flight number. There is a section here to enter a company route. You know, for example, you might punch in, you know, DTW LAX H1 for the high level route 1 that you guys, maybe the company might set it up for you, or if you always fly the same route, you could insert that, and that would automatically populate your route. But I don't have that, so what we'll do is manually input the route. Also, at a lot of airlines, you'll have you can request the route via data link, and the route this whole routing will get sent to you, and you'll be able to just basically insert it and activate and execute. But I'll show you. We'll go through a manual example here of doing the programming. I want to check if our ATIS came in yet, and it did. This little ATIS thing, this function hit that, and so Detroit is 040 at 13, gusting 29 knots, 3 miles, visibility and light rain, mist, and broken at 800 feet, overcast at 1,500, temperatures 2, dew points 2. So temperature dew point are close together, so you know there's always the potential the visibility could keep dropping significantly. Altimeter's 29.75, and remarks here something about wind. Not 100% sure. I'd have to look that up to figure out exactly what that means, but so there we go. It doesn't actually give us the active runway, or yeah, normally the ATIS would say, you know, which runway's in use. So we'll just plan 22 left, even though that really wouldn't make sense with that wind. But that's what we'll do, just as an example. Okay, so I click back on the route page here, and we're ready to input our route. We'll go depart arrive and depart Detroit. I'm going to put 22 left, and this Palace 3, maybe that's because the Palace of Auburn Hills, maybe. Palace 1 departure, and transition's going to be Dunks. Okay, we'll go back to our route page. We can see that it's in there, and after Dunks we're going to take Jet 70, and then Jet 547. What I'm going to do is drop Jet 547 right here, and what should happen is Papa Mike should automatically pop up right there. So it's a little shortcut. You could punch in Papa Mike and then Jet 547, but you know, you don't have to, so why bother? But you will want to verify that it does populate the correct waypoint. Jet 100 is our next airway. Oscar Bravo Kilo, that's the Northbrook VOR in Chicago. After that is Cotton, and then continue on Jet 100 to Sierra November Yankee. So what we have here is on Jet 100, after Cotton, we're going to climb up to flight level 340, and that's our planned airspeed of 465 knots. So it's really Jet 100 to Cotton, and then Jet 100 to Sierra November Yankee. That's really Jet 100 all the way to Sierra November Yankee. So I'll put in Sierra November Yankee. And we don't need to worry about Cotton because we know it's on the it's on Jet 100. And I put in Sierra November Yankee because there's no airway after this, so they won't know which waypoint to exit the airway off at. So I'll put in Romeo Lima Golf, RLG, JNC. I think that's Grand Junction. Juliet November Charlie. I think that's what it's called. Hotel Victor Echo. I know all these places are out in the Rockies somewhere. Jet 60. To Hotel Echo Charlie. So, and maybe I could have mentioned it earlier, but as you can see, all the airways are on the left-hand side and all the waypoints are on the right-hand side. Hotel Echo Charlie, and then the Downey 4 arrival to LA, and they're expecting runway 25 left. So, put in the arrival for Los Angeles. Is the, you can see the Downey's nowhere to be seen here, so click next page, Downey 4. Hotel Echo Charlie is the transition, and it's going to be to the ILS 25 left. And you can check and see if you'd want any of these transitions in. Have a look at the charts, see if they'd make sense or not. I'll just leave them for now. Maybe we could have a look at that en route. So we'll go back to our route page, and the last step is just to verify this. Normally in a two crew aircraft, one person would read this off, read off the FMS. One person would be following along on the flight plan to make sure that the routing is inputted correctly. So you just read out Kilo Delta Tango Whiskey going to Kilo Lima Alpha X-Ray, United Airlines Flight 507, departing runway 22 left. The Palace 1 departure to Dunks, Jet 70, Papa Mike, Jet 547, Oscar Bravo Kilo, Jet 100, Sierra November Yankee, direct to Romeo Lima Golf, direct Juliet November Charlie, direct Hotel Victor Echo, Jet 60, Hotel Echo Charlie, the Downey 4 arrival to the ILS runway 25 left. And if that looks good, activate it, execute it, and then the next page you'd be programming would be the perf init, but I always just hop off over onto the legs page prior to doing that. I verify that RNP is 1.0, and that's for an RNAV departure. That's the required navigation performance for the terminal phase on your departure. So that's what you're expecting to see, and basically just checking if there's any discontinuities on the route, and if they need to be closed up, you could close them up. And I don't see any discontinuities there. Sometimes you may want a discontinuity if you don't want to continue to the next waypoint. Maybe if you're doing an arrival, you may not want to link it up right away to an approach. But in most cases, you can pretty safely just get rid of discontinuities. Okay, so like I said, when we're done with our route, we're going to go to the perf init section, and this has got all of our weight fuel information in the FMS. So cost index of 50 off of our flight plan here. 50 reserve is going to be, okay, this is set up a little bit different than the airline I work at, but what you would want in your reserves would be your alternate plus your reserve. So this would give you, basically, the FMS will alert you when you're going to start burning into that, which basically means you don't have enough fuel to go to your destination, then to your alternate, and then have your 30-minute reserve. So 2.2 is going to go into there. Zero fuel weight, we're estimating 60.8, so that's the number that's going to go in there. And our planned fuel, so obviously we have right now 10 tons of fuel on board. That's what this slash is. This shows the actual fuel that you have. This shows, and this is what you would be planning. So we're going to actually have to give the fueler a call, see where he's at, because we don't have enough fuel on board. So so we'll get the first officer to probably do that, call up the fueler, and in the meantime we'll put in 15.9 here. That's our planned fuel for this flight. And by putting that in the planned column, all of our numbers are going to be, it's going to show us exactly what we're planning on using. But before we leave, we're going to want to make sure that we have that 15.9 of tons of fuel on board. Next step here is just verify that the gross weight is close to where you want it to be. That could indicate maybe something is off significantly. This has got 76.4, but you know, in the simulator maybe I don't have the correct amount of passengers set up on board, so that's probably why it's giving me a much lower gross weight. But you know, in real life, you would typically be within, you know, I'm usually typically within 0.3 to 0.5 anyways. Usually quite accurate. Cruise altitude. Flight level 320 initially, so that's what we're going to set. And as a technique, you could go up to your overhead panel and set the cruise altitude at this time. So that's got an execute prompt. Now we can execute that, but you know what? We're doing a long flight, so let's put the winds in here. We got the cruise winds at top of climb. Head over to the top of climb section on our flight plan, and it's showing 208 degrees at 132 knots. 208/132. So it's a pretty good headwind on our way down to LA. That's a 73 knot headwind. I could also stick in the ISA deviation. Right here is temperature deviation. So that would be this number here of +5. I don't know if you have to put the P in there, just put in 5. There you go. ISA deviation, outside air temperature of -42, and that's saying -44, so that's pretty close. I think if we put in -44 here, that'll change that. So yeah, either one of those I'm sure would be close enough. And transition altitude in North America, 18,000 feet. So that all looks good. We'll execute that. And next page we're going to head down to is the N1 limit page, down at the bottom right. This information don't really have. You'd basically, most places you could, that information could get uplinked via the data link if you had like a load master, or you could receive that. Some places you could basically pull out paper charts and determine all this stuff, or you could through the ACARS system pull up your takeoff watt. Watt stands for weight, altitude, and temperature, which would give you all the values for takeoff, all your V speeds and all that stuff. But I don't have any of that. I haven't seen any of that available, so I'm just going to kind of estimate what I think I might use on this runway. I think it's roughly 10,000 foot runway. It's pretty big, so we'll go with outside air temperature today. What did we say we had in Detroit? So I'm going to have to go all the way down to the bottom here. Bottom of the flight plan, and have a look at the METAR. The ATIS might even be more accurate. But so 2 degrees, temperature 2.2. That sounds familiar. So I'll see if I can put a flex temperature in here. I'll put in 15/2. See, okay, so that won't take. So we'll just put in the /2, the outside air temperature. And that's going to tell us when the aircraft knows what the outside air temperature is, it's going to determine what power setting it's going to use for takeoff based on that. This section here, if you wanted to do a flex takeoff, is what it's usually called, basically with reduced thrust. You could basically tell the aircraft that, hey, you know, assume it's 20 degrees outside, punch that in there, and that will lower your N1 setting. The lower setting produces lower temperatures, EGT temperatures on takeoff, and that's going to extend the life of the engines. But I guess that functionality is not on this FMS, which is fine. There's also fixed D rates here. You can use both at the same time, but we can derate the aircraft, the engine down to, from 26K down to 24K, down to 22K. That's 22,000 pounds of thrust, 26,000 pounds of thrust. So we can really reduce the thrust for takeoff. So we can do a takeoff 2. And so we can see our N1 setting drop significantly. So for a takeoff, full takeoff power is going to give us 96.4% N1. Takeoff 2 is going to give us 90.1 for a takeoff N1. That should keep the EGT down significantly compared to a full takeoff. And then because we're using a reduced takeoff setting, the FMS will automatically generate a climb setting, and it's given us a climb 2, so that's a reduced climb power setting as well. Just so that there's really no point in doing the takeoff with you know, reducing the power, and then, you know, climb power could very well be, you know, something higher than what that is. So there's no point in increasing power once we've already taken off. So they keep it. So the FMS will automatically generate an appropriate climb setting for after takeoff at 1,000 feet when we set our climb thrust. And continuing with the same idea here, bottom right, line select key, select that. That brings us to takeoff reference page. This information would also be from your takeoff watt, your takeoff performance information. So flaps, I always use 5 unless it's a really short runway and you're actually, you know, performance limited on that runway. Then you might start seeing, you know, flaps, whatever other flap setting you might use for takeoff, a higher flap setting. But, you know, you go into big airports, you can almost always expect to see 5 degrees flap. For a center of gravity, that information is actually going to come off of our AVI tab. That's where I get that information on this, in this program. Normally, you would receive load information from the company, which would give you all this information. Also, it would update all these numbers, so you would get actual weights and stuff like that, and just to fine tune it for takeoff. But so we'll just assume it's 20.1 today, and then that gives you your trim setting of 5.68 on the stab trim, and then you can go ahead and set that right away as well. Takeoff reference page. The other side of it here will just the V speeds. These would typically, the airline I work for, they come off of our performance data that we get off the ACARS along with all the other stuff on this page. But here they actually give you values to use. So we'll just take those values just by simply clicking on the line select keys, and that's it. We can also on the FMS, it gives you the option to put in an intersection on the well, the FMSs I use anyways. You have the ability to select an intersection, but it doesn't really affect the performance. It's more, I think it's more or less there as a reminder, so it's not like it's a critical thing to have. Last thing to do, head over to the progress page. Progress page contains a ton of useful information. There's 4 pages of it. Basically what I'm looking at here is Los Angeles, and the distance is 1814. So that should roughly match the flight plan distance of 1814. And what do you know? It's exact. And this is the Great Circle distance. So that'd be the absolute, that's a straight line to Los Angeles is 1716. So our routing today is going to have us go an extra 100 nautical miles, which isn't bad at all considering the length of flight this is. And the last thing this should give us is a fuel overhead estimate. Alright, so I guess we can assume that maybe the planned fuel function isn't programmed into this particular FMS, which is no big deal. I mean, we would have to wait and get full fuel, and once we are fueled up, we want to check that everything, that the fuel once we are fueled up, this value right here will show how much fuel we're planning overhead Los Angeles, and we'd want to check that it's greater than 2.9 or at least reasonable. And if it wasn't really set properly, if it was out, maybe the last thing you could possibly do is go into the go to the legs page here, select route data, and what you could do is, and on a long flight like this you might want to do this anyways, is actually punch in the winds at each waypoint or at fairly reasonable intervals. So you know, we can see the winds 208 at 132, and it's fairly consistent until about Dubuque. So we could go to Dubuque and we could put the winds at 208 degrees. The wind's at 208 degrees and 73 knots. So the tailwind's starting to drop off, so we could execute that. And we could go along like that at each significant change. Let's see here. Winds keep dropping off, so at Geordie we could put 265 degrees at 35 knots. Execute that. Normally one person would read, one person would punch this stuff in. Let's see, it goes from 35 back up to 65 here at LJ. So we can put 247 at 65. And maybe at Hector we could make the winds HEC 290 at 73. Execute that. Not a big speed change, but the direction did change fairly reasonably significant. And any more along the way. That's basically how you would, you know, correct your cruise winds. Along the way. Most companies will have a day link function as well to input the cruise winds. So it's quite a bit of programming if your day link's not working in real life, or in the sim world. I guess you could save routes, that type of stuff, into the FMS, I believe, if the functionality's there. But I mean, it's pretty quick just to punch stuff in if you're just once you get used to it. Basically the FMS programming is complete now, but I'll just go through a few more functions of the FMS while we're all set up on this flight today. These three buttons up here, the climb, cruise, and descent phases, these give you all the information of what the FMS is planning for each phase. So for the climb phase, it's planning to climb up to a cruise altitude of 320. The target speed, which is basically set off of the cost index. That's how the speed is determined. The target speed is going to be 298 knots, and at some point it's going to transition over to Mach decimal 778. It's got the speed restriction automatically programmed here, and that's 250/10,000. That's 250 knots below 10,000. That's regulation, federal regulation. Do not exceed 250 knots below 10,000. So that restriction is put in there. I believe you could put in your own value. So if you wanted to do 220 below 10, let's see if you can put that in there. Look at that. So you can execute that. If ATC, for whatever reason, said maintain 220 knots till 10,000, you could put that in there and leave the aircraft in VNAV. Basically, this is what the aircraft's planning to do if you're going to engage the VNAV in the climb. And typically you would engage VNAV, would be engaged right at takeoff, and you wouldn't, shortly after takeoff, I believe, I want to say 50 feet above the ground, but I'd have to double check on that. But shortly after takeoff, VNAV would engage, and it's going to climb up to, let's see here, I forgot to do one thing I just realized. So we got to go to the takeoff reference page, and if you look, there's no takeoff reference page to push here. So this is where you would typically go to find all those other pages. You go to initref, index, and here's all the pages, your performance, pause init, ident. If you notice, it's kind of somewhat in the order that we did it in, right? We did the ident first, then we did pause init, we did the route page, then we did perf, takeoff, and later on we'll do approach when we're airborne. But we're going to go to the takeoff page here. I actually forgot to do the second page of the takeoff reference page. And in the US, it's pretty much always 1,000. So it's going to climb out at V2 plus, I believe, 15 to 25, up to 1,000 feet AGL. And then it's going to lower the nose, set climb thrust. Thrust reduction altitude is at 1,000 AGL as well. So it's going to accelerate and set climb thrust and accelerate, and we'll clean up the flaps. We'll bring the flaps up in stages, and once the aircraft, all the flaps are up, go back to the climb page. The aircraft will accelerate to the speed 220 at 10. So I'll put, I deleted that. So you can actually delete that restriction as well. So I'm just going to put 250 at 10,000. Because even if we are, and I'll execute that, even if we are given a speed restriction, we probably wouldn't change that value. What we might do is just open up this page on the FMS, punch in 200 knots, and execute that. And we would fly out at, if ATC had requested 200 knots, that'd be a bit slow. I mean, 230 might be a little bit more reasonable. So they say 230 knots, we can fly 230 knots in VNAV, without disengaging VNAV. And when maybe they'll at some point tell us to resume normal speed, select this econ button, and that brings us back to our cost index speed. Also, which is pretty interesting, if your aircraft, if ATC wants, sometimes if they've got traffic coming in, they'll ask for a good rate. They'll ask you to expedite your climb. So you could go to max rate of climb, select that. Max rate of climb is going to be dependent on basically the altitude you're presently at. So you know, you could set max rate, and your VNAV will automatically target max rate of climb. Max angle of climb, select that, and your VNAV, it's basically the same airspeed. So hard to say if that function is actually working, but it did bring you back to 250. So it might not be really too far from that airspeed, anyways. But I'll go back to econ here. Anytime you want to go back to your cost index, you just hit econ, and then you'll fly the flight plan speeds. This has got your climb N1 settings of 91.3, so that's your climb 2, which is actually, I believe it's a little bit higher than our takeoff thrust, so it's actually going to bump the thrust up a little bit when it sets climb power. Which makes sense, because eventually you're going to need some significant power to make it all the way up to your cruise altitude of 320. Anyways, back on the climb page, this gives you the amount of time. It's estimating that you're going to be at a certain waypoint at a certain altitude. So once you get going on the flight, it might say, you know, ATC might say, hey, are you able to make dunks at an altitude? Are you able to cross dunks above flight level 200? And so, you know, dunks would be in there, and you could actually probably use the required time at. Okay, that function's not really working. But it would tell you what altitude it's estimating to be at each point along the way in the climb phase. And you can see if you're gonna, be high or be low when if you're gonna make that restriction. This page will make a lot more sense once you're actually flying and it's got some information up there. This engine out selection. Okay, so these two functions I guess are not usable in the FMS. Econ cruise page. I'll go back here just to say that, so if you ever did have an engine failure, you would click this, select failed engine left or right, and then it would give you, basically your best lift to drag speed if you're going to drift down from cruise altitude, and also the maximum altitude that you're able to maintain. Moving on to the cruise page. Again, it shows cruise at flight level 320. Target speed is going to be either 310 knots or Mach 0.78, basically whichever is higher. And if you do run into some significant turbulence, basically severe turbulence, you would disconnect the auto thrust and set 93.1% on the N1, and that would basically give you your safest speed between your high speed and your low speed buffet up at high altitude. It's saying fuel at LA is 0.6, but that's because we're not fully fueled up yet. This is pretty important here. If ATC asks, hey, can you climb up to flight level 380? In this case, we would not be able to. Max altitude is flight level 371, and really you wouldn't want to climb up to much higher than flight level 360. A good 1,000 feet below your max, because you just kind of lose the ability to climb at that point. And if you were able to get up to 380, you probably wouldn't be able to maintain it. You would end up at a point probably on the backside of the power curve, and you might end up not being able to maintain altitude and having to descend, which you would probably possibly cause some confliction there. So other traffic, optimum, which is I think basically the where the FMS calculates your best I think fuel burn would be is at 343, so maybe 340. So it makes sense that you would make your get a step climb fairly soon in there up to flight level 340. Looks like, so that's 9 minutes. That's 15. A half hour after climbing up to 32, you're going to be climbing back up to 34. And again, if you wanted to change your speed and cruise, so you wanted to cruise a little bit, pick up the speed a little bit, you could put Mach 0.79 in there. It's not going to accept that. Oh, I put 2 decimals, Mach 0.79 in there. You could execute that, pick up the speed a bit, and if you wanted to slow back down to a normal airspeed to your cost index, you just select Econ. If you were concerned about your fuel state, you wanted to save some gas, you could go to long range cruise here. That's just going to basically do the same thing that the Econ button does, only it's going to give you, I believe, a cost index of 0, which is your minimum fuel burn to get to wherever you're going. Yeah, these two buttons don't work on this page either. Here's your descent page. Ended descent altitude 152. That's probably the threshold of runway 25 left in LA. Basically, it builds its profile back from that point. So it's targeting Mach 0.78, 290, and then transition to 290 knots in the descent. And then once it reaches 10,000 feet, it's going to slow down to 240 knots. So that's exactly what your VNAV is planning if you're going to use the VNAV in the descent. This is the off-path descent information right here. this is actually really useful if you're, maybe if you're not on a route, maybe you're on radar vectors and you're concerned about the, maybe you're concerned about how high you are. If you're getting high, you could put runway 25 left. You put the runway in there, and notice I just grabbed that right from the legs page. You can just go to the legs page and grab 25 left, descent page. You can put a slash, and okay, maybe the off-path descent information doesn't work. What that does is basically it would then populate an should give you one. Should automatically put the runway elevation there, and that'll tell you what your flight path angle currently is. The vertical bearing to get to this direct to this waypoint and this altitude, which I'm trying to put in 25 left and 152 feet. So that, you know, it might, if it said 6, you know, you're not going to do a 6-degree angle down to the runway, so you wouldn't be able to head direct to the numbers and land. You could maybe do, you know, depending on where you're at, maybe you could get away with 4 with the speed brakes out, but you would want to be stabilized by 1,000 feet above the ground. So all things to keep in mind. But you know, if you look down, you saw a vertical bearing of 2, you would realize, hey, you know, I don't need to start down yet. I could wait till it's closer to 3 and start down on a 3-degree slope, and this will give you instant information on what your actual flight path angle is. And if those two match, you're basically on a straight line for the numbers, vertically anyways. And this vertical speed will tell you what vertical speed you need to do to make this waypoint at this altitude. So it's pretty, it can be useful to use in flight. You could really put anything in there. You could go to your legs page and grab, there's all these. Okay, so there's really no altitude restrictions on the arrival, but you've got Honda there at 3,600. What did I do? If you ever click on something and you're not sure what you did, like I just did, basically the best thing to do is just erase and start over again. Because I clicked something and I made a change to the flight plan. I don't know what happened, but I'm going to grab Honda and I'm going to put slash 3600, because that's a crossing restriction that you're required to be at Honda at 3,600 feet or below. Go to the descent page and see if no, I can't put that in there either. So sometimes it's useful to use that. I don't know if it's functional. You can check that in flight. Here's the descent forecast page. Basically, if you look at the climb page, we looked at everything in there. Descent page, the last thing to look at is the econ works the exact same as on all the other pages. If we go to the forecast section, this gives you descent forecasts, and usually you fill this out prior to commencing descent. You can fill it out any time really though, but it just gives your VNAV some extra information to give you a more accurate descent profile. And you can see it's planning a 500 foot per minute cabin rate descent, which is nice and just fairly slow. Transition of flight level 180. If you're planning on descending through some cloud, and you'd expect maybe the temperatures to be below 10 degrees Celsius, you could put in thermal anti-ice. So if you're going to fly through any icing conditions and you're going to use the engine anti-ice, that will increase your approach idle, your idle N1. When your anti-ice is on, your N1 is going to be slightly above what it normally would be, basically to maintain the bleed air temperature hot enough going through the cowls. So let's say there was clouds at 200 and you were going to exit those clouds at 10,000 feet. Okay, let's try this. That's not really taking it, so I don't know what I'm doing there. 20,000, 10,000. Okay, and normally that would work, but I mean that's not, you know, super important stuff either. You don't really need to do that. You could definitely get away without it if we looked at the, you could put in your ISO deviation. Let's see, top of descent. Right now it's ISO deviation, temperature deviation here is 0, so we could put 0, and we could check the ATIS. Look at the ATIS for LA, say, just for argument's sake, it's 30.01. Put that in there, and I won't execute it because we can put in the winds as well. So you probably want your descent winds in there, and that's right here. So if we're going to be at 340 roughly, I'm not going to bother putting in 35, so I'll put in 310. I'll put in 2. Okay, this has some different altitudes than what I'm used to, but I'll put in 200, and I'll put in 10,000. 10,000. So, and basically those are the altitudes. We'll put the corresponding winds in there. So 300 at 64. 312 at 47. 322 at 38, and confirm it, execute. And that basically gives the FMS VNAV descent path good information, more accurate information to plan a nice flight idle descent profile, which is basically the goal. The goal is at top of descent, we're going to bring the thrust back, and it's going to stay at or near idle almost all the way down to the, as far as possible. That concludes our video today on the pre-flight setup of the flight management system in the Boeing 737-800 Zibo mod in X-Plane 11. I sincerely hope you enjoyed, and very much appreciate if you click the like button as well as subscribe to the Mach 5 channel. On the Mach 5 channel you can reference all my video tutorials, guides, and gameplay neatly organized. I'll be publishing new content in the very near future, so keep an eye out for those, and in the meantime, fly safe. Cheers.